Things hadn't been going so well between us lately. The arguments, the distance, the silence at the dinner table. It was all starting to wear thin, but I was still in it, still fighting for us. I made reservations at that little place she liked. Quiet, candlelit. I even had a surprise in my jacket pocket. 2 tickets. A getaway. A chance to reconnect. Something that said, hey, I still believe in us. But then life punched me straight in the gut. She texted, running late at work. So I thought I'd bring dinner to her. A little surprise. A little romance. What I saw through that office window. My wife. In her boss's arms. Laughing. Kissing him like I didn't even exist. No warning. No shame. Just betrayal. Raw. Open and cold. Now, I'm not the type to throw things or make a scene. That's not me. What I did instead. It was silent. Precise. Ruthless. First, I vanished. Then, one by one, her world started to fall apart. All she had left was the memory of the man she threw away and the regret that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The way I did it. Call it what you want. Revenge, justice, a masterclass in letting someone destroy themselves. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let me take you back to where it all started. My name's Mark, I'm 38, and I've always been a simple kind of guy. I work with my hands, construction and remodeling mostly, and I've lived in this town my whole life. I like routines, football on Sundays, mowing the yard just right, and putting in a full day's work I can feel in my back by dinner time. I'm not flashy. I don't chase trends. I believe in showing up, staying loyal, and keeping your word. My wife, Lisa, she's 36. We met I was 23 and she was fresh out of college. She was wearing this green dress I still remember, even after all these years. She laughed like someone who didn't carry any weight on her shoulders. Smart, too. She had just landed her first marketing job, talked about big ideas like brand strategy and customer behavior. I didn't understand half of it, but I loved how her eyes lit up when she spoke. We dated for a couple years and got married on a windy October afternoon, under a maple tree that dropped red leaves on our shoulders like confetti. She planned the whole thing herself. Handmade invitations, rustic centerpieces, the works. Everyone said we were a solid match. And for a long time, I believed we were. We bought a small house a few miles outside of town. She commuted into the city while I worked local jobs. We were never rich, but we did okay. We cooked together, we binge-watched crime shows, we talked about maybe having kids once things settled down. There were hard moments, sure, but there was laughter too. A lot of it. But then, slowly, like the way a tree dies from the inside out, something changed. She started coming home later. Started looking at me like I was a background noise she didn't have time for. Her phone was always in her hand. Her answers got shorter, and her smiles faded into those polite, empty ones you give strangers in a grocery store aisle. And that brings me to the night everything started to shift. I remember it better than I'd like to. It was a Thursday. Cold, but not bitter, just enough wind to make the porch creak when you opened the screen door. I'd been planning this night for weeks. Things had been tense between us for months, and I wanted to do something to fix it. Nothing big or dramatic. Just a quiet dinner, the kind that might remind her of what we still had. I booked us a table at Johnny's, her favorite little Italian place. Same booth we always used to sit in, corner one by the window. But that wasn't the only thing I had up my sleeve. I'd also bought 2 plane tickets for a weekend getaway. Just a cabin in the Blue Ridge, surrounded by trees and nothing else. A fireplace, some quiet, no phones. I thought maybe, just maybe, it could be the reset we needed. I got off work early that day and drove home humming along to old country songs. Took a shower, shaved, even put on that button-up she used to compliment. Said it made me look like a man in charge. I splashed on some cologne I hadn't worn in over a year, the bottle nearly dusty. Folded the tickets, tucked them into my wallet behind my license, and looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't look younger. I looked tired, but hopeful. Lisa wasn't home yet, so I waited. 6:12 p.m. That's when the text came. Hey babe, running late at work. Can we do dinner another night? Sorry. Love you. I read it once, then again. My stomach turned. I didn't respond right away. I just sat there, wallet still open in my hand, the tickets staring up at me like a bad joke. But I didn't get angry. That's not who I am. I told myself, she's just busy, she's been stressed, and I can be understanding. After about 10 minutes of staring at the wall, I got an idea. Maybe if she couldn't come to dinner, I could bring dinner to her. It wasn't the candlelight and wine, but maybe a small surprise would mean something. So I called Johnny's, asked them to pack our meal to go. Chicken parm for me. Penne with vodka sauce for her. I picked up the food, and on the way to her office, I stopped at a gas station and grabbed a bouquet, nothing fancy, just some daisies and sunflowers wrapped in plastic. She liked flowers that looked like they came from a field, not a florist. I arranged everything in the passenger seat like it mattered, like I was setting a stage. Food, flowers, bottle of Chianti she liked. I even scribbled a note on a napkin from my glove box. Thought I'd bring date night to you. Love, M. The drive to her office took about 20 minutes. I remember how dark it was already, how quiet the roads were. My hands were cold on the steering wheel, even with the heater blowing. I kept thinking about how surprised she'd be, how she might smile, a real one, the kind that hit her eyes. Maybe we'd laugh. Maybe we'd share dessert over her desk and talk about old memories. Her office building sat on the east side of town, all glass and clean lines. I pulled into the parking garage, parked in one of the visitor spots, and grabbed the bag and flowers. I made my way to the elevator, heart starting to beat faster now. Nerves, I told myself. Not fear. Just nerves. The elevator dinged and I stepped out onto her floor. It was quiet. Too quiet. Most of the lights were out, just the glow of a few monitors and a buzzing exit sign down the hall. I walked toward her office, third door on the right, across from the little conference room. I could see her light was still on. As I got closer, I slowed down. The moment I stepped closer to the door, I knew. Call it gut instinct. Call it the way the air shifted, heavier, like it knew something I didn't want to admit yet. I've worked on roofs in summer heat, stood in basements ankle-deep in floodwater, but I'd never felt my heart pound the way it did in that hallway. I stood there outside her office, dinner bag warm in one hand, flowers in the other, that little note I'd written still tucked under the fold of the napkin. The voices from inside kept drifting through the crack in the door. Hers soft, playful. Then his, lower, calm, too familiar. I leaned just enough to peek inside. The door was open maybe 3 inches. Just enough to see the corner of her desk. The glow of the desk lamp made the whole room look golden. Cozy. Private. She was facing away from me at first, sitting on the edge of her desk, legs swinging slightly, a wine glass in her hand. Her laugh rang out, not the tired chuckle she gave me these days, but the kind that used to belong to me, back when we were new. And then he stepped closer. Her boss. I'd only met him once, at a company Christmas party a couple years back. Firm handshake, good suit, loud voice. The kind of guy who always looked like he knew something you didn't. Even then, something about him rubbed me the wrong way. Not that I said anything at the time. Just filed it away as a feeling. Now here he was, standing between her knees, smiling like he owned the room, like he owned her. She reached up, touched the knot of his tie. Said something I couldn't hear. He bent forward, and she tilted her head just so, like they'd done it 100 times before. Her hand slid behind his neck. Then came the kiss. I blinked. Once. Twice. But it didn't go away. I didn't move. Couldn't. My brain felt like it had short-circuited. My fingers went numb, the bag sagging in my grip. The flowers shifted, a few petals falling to the carpet at my feet. She kissed him like I hadn't been standing outside her door with dinner and a heart full of hope. Like I hadn't spent the day thinking of ways to bring us back. Like I didn't exist. I took a step back, slow and quiet. My foot caught the edge of the hallway rug, and I nearly dropped everything. I steadied myself against the wall, heart slamming in my chest. I felt dizzy. Like the floor wasn't where it was supposed to be. My phone was in my back pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands and opened the camera. I didn't think, didn't plan, just acted. Snapped one photo, then another. Zoomed in, trying to steady the frame. Her face tilted up toward his, lips still parted. His hand on her waist. Click. Click. That was all I needed. That was all I could take. I backed away from the door, retraced my steps down the hall. The lights above buzzed faintly, flickering like old gas station bulbs. Everything felt surreal. Like I was watching myself in a movie, some poor fool carrying dinner to a woman who'd already given his place away. I reached the elevator and hit the button 3 times before it lit up. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the phone. I didn't cry. Not yet. I don't know if it was shock or pride or just the way I was raised, but I didn't let anything out. The elevator doors opened with a ding, and I stepped in, the smell of garlic and marinara sauce filling the space. I stared at my reflection in the mirrored wall, pale, tired, like I'd aged a decade in 10 minutes. The flowers were crushed in my grip now. I didn't even realize I'd been squeezing them. On the ground floor, I walked out into the cold night. The air hit me hard, stung my face, snapped me back to reality. I crossed the parking lot like a man walking out of a fire, not even noticing how tightly I was holding the paper bag until the bottom started to tear. Sauce leaked through the side, staining the napkin with the note still inside. I found the trash can near the building's main exit, one of those heavy concrete ones with a metal dome lid. I stood there for a second, staring at it. Then I reached into my wallet. The tickets were still there, folded crisp and perfect. Round trip to the mountains. Cabin, fireplace, nothing but trees and silence. I looked down at them, tried to imagine handing them to her over a plate of pasta, seeing her eyes go wide like they used to when I surprised her. But that wasn't real anymore. I crumpled the tickets in my hand. Not all at once. Just slowly. Carefully. Like I was folding up the last piece of the life I thought we had. Then I dropped them in the trash. Next went the flowers, torn and limp, petals falling like confetti. Then the bag of food, the napkin notes still stuck to the side, sauce soaking through the bottom. I stood there for another minute, just breathing. That was it. I didn't go back inside. I didn't call her. I didn't give her the chance to lie or explain or reach for excuses. She didn't even know I'd been there. And that, for some reason, felt right. I climbed into my truck and sat behind the wheel, hands gripping the steering column. The silence was deafening. I didn't turn on the radio, didn't check my phone, just stared through the windshield at the building I thought I knew, the woman I thought I knew, and felt something inside me go quiet. Not broken. Not yet. But changed. There's a moment when everything you thought you could count on slips away in a blink. When the floor falls out, and the people you trust turn into strangers in their own skin. That moment doesn't come with fireworks or screaming or some big dramatic scene. Sometimes it comes in the shape of a hallway, a crack in a door, a kiss that wasn't meant for you, and you just walk away. I don't remember the drive home. I know I drove it. I know I kept both hands on the wheel, eyes on the road. I must have stopped at the red lights, signaled where I had to. But none of it stuck. The streets were familiar, but everything felt off, like I'd stepped into some alternate version of my own life. The inside of the truck was too quiet, too still. Even with the heater running, I couldn't shake the cold. It had crawled under my skin and settled there, like it belonged now. My hands were clenched so tight I had to peel my fingers off the steering wheel one at a time when I pulled into our driveway. The porch light was on. That's what hit me first. Just the porch light. She must have set the timer like she always did, the one that flicked it on at dusk and off at dawn. Routine. Habit. Something she used to brag about keeping organized. Funny how a tiny light could hit you in the gut harder than the truth ever could. I sat there for a long time, staring at the front door, knowing I couldn't stay. Not even for a night. I walked inside without taking off my boots. That alone would have driven her crazy on any other day. She used to get on me about tracking dirt in, especially when she'd just cleaned the floors. Mark, she'd say, just kick him off on the mat. It's not hard. And now here I was, stomping mud and road dust straight across the entryway like I wanted to ruin something. The house was dead quiet. No TV humming in the background, no music from her office, not even the dryer rumbling in the laundry room like usual. Just silence. Heavy and thick, like it was waiting for me to do something. I set my keys on the kitchen counter, looked around the room we'd shared for years, and realized I couldn't look at any of it the same way again. I didn't waste time. Grabbed my duffel bag from the hall closet and walked into the bedroom. Threw in 3 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, socks, boxers, my shaving kit, passport, birth certificate, the kind of stuff you take when you're not sure if you're coming back. I moved on autopilot. I didn't stop to think about it. My body just knew what to do. In the bathroom, I stared at the mirror. The man looking back at me didn't look furious. He didn't even look hurt. He looked hollow, like the part of me that used to believe in something had been scooped out and left behind. I walked back to the kitchen and tore a piece of paper from the notepad we kept by the fridge, the one with her initials printed at the top. I grabbed a pen from the junk drawer, wrote 5 words in all caps, each one pressing harder than the last. Hope it was worth it. No name. No signature. No explanation. I left it dead center on the table, right where she'd see it when she got home. Then I grabbed my phone, turned it off, pried off the back, pulled out the SIM card and dropped it in the garbage disposal. Didn't even bother flipping the switch. Just left it sitting there, dead and quiet, like the part of me that used to wait for her messages. I stepped out the front door without looking back. No suitcase wheels. No double-checking drawers. just my duffel slung over one shoulder and my truck keys in hand. I drove across town to a little motel tucked between an abandoned gas station and a pawn shop. One of those places with buzzing neon signs and curtains that haven't been changed since the 80s. I paid in cash. Told the guy at the front desk I'd only need one night, maybe two. He slid me the key without asking anything else. Room 106. Smelled like old smoke and lemon cleaner. The carpet was thin and faded. The bed looked like it had been sat on more than it had been slept in. The heater rattled when I turned it on, blowing warm air with a musty breath behind it. I dropped my bag in the corner and sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, staring at the TV without turning it on. The remote was taped together with electrical tape, buttons half-worn from years of use. I didn't care. I wasn't here to watch anything. I was here to think. My mind raced, not with anger, not even with sorrow, but with calculation. I've never been a vengeful man. I don't believe in screaming matches or breaking dishes or slashing tires. That stuff's for movies and hotheads. But justice? That I believe in. Quiet. Precise. Measured. The kind that doesn't show up with a bang, but creeps in like a fog and changes everything before the other person knows what hit them. That's what I wanted. Not just to leave, but to let her feel the silence. The absence. The missing weight of my presence in every part of her life. I wanted her to come home and find it empty. Not just the house. Everything. The warmth. The trust. The safety she took for granted. She'd walk in and see that note on the table and think, what happened? And then she'd realize. I thought about the dinner I never got to eat. The wine I never opened. The plane tickets now lying at the bottom of a trash can. I thought about her smile, the one she gave him, and how it used to be mine. I didn't cry. Not even then. I pulled my wallet from my back pocket and opened it. Her photo was still tucked inside. A little one we took at a fair years ago, her in sunglasses, me with a sunburn and a goofy grin. I looked at it for a long moment, then slid it out and placed it face down on the nightstand. It was time to disappear for a while. Let the silence do the talking. When I woke up in that motel room the next morning, everything felt different. Not better. Not easier. Just clear. The kind of clear you get after a storm tears through town and knocks down everything soft. No more guessing. No more wondering what went wrong or if I was imagining things. No more trying to fix what she already gave away. It was over. And now it was time to take control of what came next. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while, listening to the hum of the heater. My boots were on the floor beside me, my bag in the corner, untouched since the night before. I could have stared at the walls all day, could have let it all crush me, but I didn't. I stood up, got dressed, washed my face in the yellow-lit bathroom, looked in the mirror and said, get moving. First stop was a law office I'd driven past 1,000 times, Singleton and Brooks. Little brick building near the courthouse, American flag out front, gold lettering on the window. Never thought I'd need a divorce lawyer, but here we were. The receptionist looked up when I stepped inside. Middle-aged woman, friendly smile. Do you have an appointment? No, I said. But I've got a phone full of pictures and a marriage that's already dead. I need to talk to someone. She didn't flinch. Just nodded and asked me to take a seat. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from a man in a navy suit, silver hair, hands folded like a poker player who already knew the cards I had. He listened as I laid it all out, the reservations, the dinner, the surprise visit to her office, the doors slightly open, what I saw through the glass. When I finished, I handed him the phone. He flipped through the pictures, gave a slow nod, and said, we've got something to work with. That was all I needed to hear. I didn't want revenge in the messy, loud kind of way. I didn't want yelling or drama. I wanted the kind of justice that doesn't come with shouting. The kind that's patient, deliberate, legal, permanent. He walked me through the next steps. We discussed the timeline, the assets, the accounts. He asked questions. I had answers. I wasn't confused anymore. I was focused. I left his office with a folder under my arm and a growing list in my head. Back in the truck, I drove straight to the bank. Our accounts were tied together, checking, savings, credit cards, even a joint store card at the furniture place downtown. She liked having things shared. Said it kept things simple. Said it made us a team. Funny how one person can burn the whole team down and still expect to get their morning latte like nothing happened. At the bank, I sat down with a representative and went through everything. Closed the joint accounts. Moved the money into a personal one under just my name. Froze the credit cards. Canceled her access to anything with my name on it. By the time I left, she wouldn't even be able to put gas in her car unless she had cash in her purse. And she wouldn't know why not yet. She was probably already texting me by then. I hadn't checked. My phone was still off, shoved into my glove box. I figured she'd come home and wonder where I was. Maybe she'd think I'd been called into work. Then she'd see the note on the table. At that point, her stomach would drop. From there, I imagine it spiraled fast. The first card declined? Probably at the coffee shop. I could see it clear as day, her tapping her phone at the register, then swiping her card, then getting that awkward smile from the barista. Sorry, ma'am. It's not going through. She'd try again. Maybe laugh a little. That's weird. It worked this morning. But it wouldn't. She'd pull out another card. Same thing. Panic would start to settle in quiet at first, like a whisper in the back of her mind. That's when she'd start calling me. Maybe once. Then again, faster. She'd know then. Know that I'd seen everything. Know that the man she left behind last night wasn't just hurt. He was gone. And the one who took his place wasn't coming back to talk things through. Back at the motel, I laid low. Didn't check out. Didn't call anyone. I bought a burner phone from the convenience store down the street and saved the number only my lawyer had. No one else. No family. No friends. Not yet. I kept thinking about how quiet she'd gotten the last few months, how she'd smiled less, touched less, talked less. I used to think she was just tired, worn down by work. Turns out she was just rerouting her attention, giving the best parts of herself to someone else while I stood in the kitchen making dinner for two. But not anymore. I wasn't going to be the fool she came home to after work, acting like everything was fine. I wasn't going to sit at a table waiting for scraps of affection while she played house with a man who probably didn't even know how I liked my coffee. I was done. That afternoon, I pulled out a notebook and started writing things down, what we owned, what we owed, what needed untangling. The truck was mine outright. The house? Also in my name. Bought it before we were married, though she always liked to call it ours. That was going to make things simpler now. There wouldn't be any court battles over who owned what. I had the title in my safe, and the mortgage paperwork all had my name on the dotted lines. That house was mine to sell, and she'd know it soon enough. Furniture, savings, insurance policies. I listed every single detail. I had facts on my side, truth on my side, and a man with a sharp suit and a sharper mind building the case behind me. While she was probably pacing the kitchen, trying to reach a phone that wouldn't ring, I was setting every domino in place. Quiet. Calm. No yelling. No arguing. Just decisions. Decisions she wouldn't see coming. And this was only the beginning. The house didn't feel like home anymore. I don't know if it happened the night I saw her in that office or the next morning in the motel, but something in me let go of it. The memories. The meaning. The roots we thought we planted. All of it felt hollow now, like a stage set from a play that already ended. I built half of that place with my own two hands. Laid the hardwood in the living room, installed the cabinets in the kitchen. I'd patched the roof one winter when the shingles came loose in a storm. Spent Saturdays mowing the lawn and winters salting the driveway. It was the kind of house folks drive past and say, now that's a solid place to build a life. And for a while, it was. But not anymore. Now every corner of it reminded me of what she'd thrown away. The laughter in the hallway. The smell of her perfume on the couch pillow. The stupid little ceramic mug she bought from a flea market in Asheville, lined up neat in the cupboard. It wasn't a house anymore. It was a grave. So I decided to sell it. I called my lawyer first. Told him I was ready to move forward on the property. He didn't ask why. He just said, we'll get the paperwork going, and huck up like it was any other Thursday. But for me, it was the moment I decided to erase her from the very ground we stood on. He drafted up the notice of sale, along with the eviction. Served it straight to her work address. I asked him to. I wanted it official, cold, no warning, the same way she'd blindsided me. I could picture it clear as day. Her sitting at her desk in that polished office with her spreadsheets and coffee cup. The receptionist walking in with a white envelope and handing it over. Her opening it. Reading the first page. Eviction. Sale. Her name typed in block letters. I bet her hands shook. I bet her stomach dropped the same way mine did that night I stood outside her door. Maybe she gasped. Maybe she just sat there frozen, paper crinkling in her grip as she tried to make sense of it all. By the time the envelope hit her desk, the listing agent had already posted photos online. Clean, bright, staged to sell. The next blow came just a couple days later. Divorce papers. Nothing fancy. No dramatic language. Just a cold stack of pages with our names at the top and a timeline that spelled out the end. My lawyer made sure every line was ironclad. I didn't want her to have a single crack to crawl back through. No, we need to talk. No, can we try counseling? None of that. There was nothing left to fix. No conversation. No apology. No deal to be made. This was final. I had it served at home. I made sure of it. Wanted her to open the door expecting silence, and instead be handed the full weight of what she'd done. The guy who delivered it told me later she didn't say a word. Just stood there holding the envelope, hair still damp like she'd just gotten out of the shower. Her eyes blank. Her lips parted like she was going to speak, but nothing came out. That's what betrayal does when it circles back around. It doesn't shout. It just stares you down and lets the silence do the damage. I didn't care where she went after that. Whether she called her sister, or her friend Marcy, or that same boss she got tangled up with. I didn't care what explanation she gave, or if she gave one at all. She'd built a little world out of secrets and half-truths, and now it was caving in. Let her scramble. Let her feel the ground shift under her feet. I didn't want the house. Not anymore. I didn't want the bed we used to share, or the coffee mugs, or the backyard she always said we should turn into a garden, but never did. I didn't want the walls that heard our arguments or the pictures that froze us in time like we were still happy. I wanted out. And this was how I started walking. Once the papers were served, I let my lawyer handle the rest. He kept me updated, sent me email confirmations, told me what to expect. I didn't even need to be in the same room as her. Everything could be done at a distance. Which was good, because I didn't want to see her. Not yet. Not until everything was settled. Not until the pieces of the life we built were packed, sold, deleted. Not until there was nothing left for her to cling to or twist or apologize for. I took a few days off work, told my boss I had personal matters to deal with. He didn't press, just patted my shoulder and said, "Whatever you need." Folks in town started to notice I wasn't around much, but nobody asked. And I liked it that way. I stayed in that motel longer than I thought I would. The place was lousy, sure, thin towels, weak coffee, a heater that clicked like a busted metronome. But it was quiet. It was simple. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells in my own home. I sat on that lumpy bed every night with a notepad in my lap, writing out plans. Not revenge. Not bitterness. Just closure. Lists of what I needed to update, address changes, insurance forms, legal documents. I started sorting out my life like a man starting over. One night, I looked up the house online. Just out of curiosity. There it was, right on the realtor's page. Charming 3-bedroom with open layout, hardwood floors, and updated appliances. The pictures were crisp, staged. None of our stuff in view. No trace of us. I clicked through each photo like I was scrolling past a stranger's life. And maybe, in a way, I was. I closed the browser, turned off the lamp, and laid back on the bed. Not thinking about her. Not thinking about him. Just listening to the sound of cars passing on the highway outside. That house used to mean everything to me. Now it was just a listing. And I was just a name on a legal document she never thought she'd receive. By the time I sent the picture to the HR department's post office, I no longer felt angry. Not the kind that burns hot and loud. This was different. Cold. Settled. Like a quiet snowfall that covers everything dead in the yard. I'd been holding onto the image for a while. Not sure when or if I'd use it. But when I saw the real estate agent update the house status to under contract, I knew it was time. I opened the message app on my burner phone, found the right contacts. I didn't type a single word. Just attached the photo and hit send. The one I took outside her office. Her, laughing. Her boss, leaning in. That moment, frozen in the amber glow of a desk lamp, right before their lips met. It wasn't graphic. Nothing you could arrest anyone over. But it told the truth. Quietly. Clearly. Indisputably. I imagined her face when HR, and then she would open it up. The way her eyes would scan the image. The realization dawning like a slow sunrise that she hadn't just been caught. She'd been seen. Documented. Time-stamped. No way to lie her way out of it. I didn't send anything else. No caption. No comment. Just the photo. Then I turned the phone off again. A few days passed before I heard about what happened next. Not from her. Not from anyone who meant to tell me. But from a guy I used to work with. His wife worked at the same firm. We ran into each other at the hardware store, just making small talk, while picking out stain for a deck job I'd taken on to keep my mind busy. I heard something wild, he said, shaking his head like he didn't believe his own words. That marketing firm downtown? Big shakeup. Fired 2 people. High-ups too. He didn't know the full story, not yet, but I could see it in his face. He'd heard the rumors. So I played dumb. Really? I said. What for? He gave me a look like he was trying to decide whether to spill the rest. Then he leaned in a little and said, office relationship. One of them married. Whole thing got ugly. Somebody sent in proof. Email or picture, I think. I nodded. Damn. That's rough. He had no idea I was the one who sent it. By the end of the week, it was official. Her name had been scrubbed from the company website. The boss's too. Gone without ceremony. No LinkedIn announcements. No farewell emails. Just vanished. That's how corporate handles messes like that. Quiet, fast, brutal. Especially when the affair happened under their roof, on their time, with a married employee who'd just been served divorce papers. No company wants to deal with fallout or potential legal noise. They didn't even give her a warning. Just a box and a hallway full of eyes. I can only imagine how that day went for her. Walking out of the office with her cardigan folded over one arm, her box full of plants and awards, and whatever else she kept on her desk. Passing by coworkers who wouldn't meet her eyes. The same people she used to joke with in the break room, now whispering behind her back. She used to brag about how respected she was there. They value me, she'd say. I'm irreplaceable. Turns out she wasn't. Turns out a reputation can fall faster than a tree in a storm. It didn't take long for the calls to start. She didn't have my new number at first, only my lawyer did. But she must have gotten it from him somehow. Maybe she begged. Maybe she cried. Maybe she convinced him it was for something important. I never asked. All I know is, one day the burner buzzed while I was sitting in that motel room, and her name showed up on the screen. Then again, and again, I let it ring. Let it go to voicemail. I didn't answer. I didn't even listen. Just watched them stack up like letters I had no intention of opening. If she thought hearing my voice would be her way back in, she was wrong. That door was locked. Sealed. Gone. She tried to email me too. I had a separate inbox for anything legal, and one day it came through. Subject line blank. Just her name in the sender field. I hovered over it for a moment. Then I archived it without opening. She didn't deserve a read receipt. Let her wonder. Let her sit alone at the kitchen table, the same one I left that note on, and feel the world shifting beneath her feet. No job. No money. No fallback plan. Just consequences, unfolding piece by piece. I'm sure she cried. I'm sure she called friends, tried to spin the story in ways that made her sound like the one who got blindsided. That's how people like her survive. They twist things. Leave out the details. Blame the reaction instead of the act. But eventually, the truth leaks through. It always does. I drove past the house a week after the papers were served. Stayed across the street, engine idling. A different car was in the driveway. Probably a realtor or a contractor getting things prepped for closing. She wasn't home. Or if she was, she stayed inside. I looked at the windows, the front door, the porch we built together. For a second, I felt something stir, not regret, not forgiveness. Just memory. Like watching a movie of someone else's life. Then I drove off. That night, I walked into a diner 2 towns over and sat at the counter. Ordered a black coffee and a piece of pie. Nobody knew me there. The waitress called me Han and asked if I wanted cream. I said no. I liked it bitter. While I ate, I thought about how quickly things unravel when they've been fake for too long. All it took was one photograph. One undeniable truth. And everything she'd built, the image, the comfort, the control, fell apart like a house of cards. She didn't just lose me. She lost her image. Her job. Her safety net. Her next paycheck. Her sense of control. She was finally standing in the storm she created. And for the first time in a long time, I felt nothing at all. The day the divorce was finalized, the air outside felt heavier than usual. Everything between us had happened through lawyers. Forms. Filings. Signatures. No calls. No face-to-face. She'd reached out, sure. Those early texts, the voicemails I never listened to, the emails I never opened. But I hadn't spoken a word to her since I left that note on the kitchen table. Hope it was worth it. I'd meant every letter. And now we were here. Inside that building, in a courtroom with polished floors and a clock that ticked too loud, the life we built, or thought we built, was being dismantled with stamps and legalese. My lawyer met me outside the entrance. Everything's in place, he said. This should be smooth. I nodded. Is she here? She's already inside. I don't know what I expected. Regret? Anger? Some last-ditch plea? I'd rehearsed every possible version of what she might do. But nothing prepared me for how she actually looked when I walked into that room. She was sitting at the plaintiff's table in a gray blazer that didn't fit quite right, like it had been borrowed or pulled from the back of a closet. Her hair was flat. No makeup. Her hands were folded tight in her lap, like she was holding something together that wanted to fall apart. She looked small. Not physically. Emotionally. Like someone who hadn't slept right in weeks. Like someone who'd spent every day since the world fell out from under her, trying to rewind the clock in her head. Our eyes met. And for a second, I saw a flicker of the woman I used to love. The woman who laughed in the kitchen while stirring sauce, who danced barefoot on the porch when it rained, who curled up next to me during storms and said I made her feel safe. But that woman had made her choice. And the one in front of me now was living with it. The judge was a tired-looking man with a voice like sandpaper. He read through the paperwork, made sure everything was filed, and confirmed we both agreed to the terms. My lawyer handled most of it. Hers, a younger guy who looked uncomfortable, barely said a word. And then it came time to acknowledge the prenup. We'd signed it back when we were still hopeful. She was hesitant at the time, thought it was too businesslike, but I insisted. I'd worked hard to build what little I had, and I wanted us both protected in case something ever went wrong. She signed it eventually, with a laugh and a kiss. One of the clauses was clear as glass. Infidelity nullified spousal support. No alimony. No claim to the house, the truck, the accounts. It was in writing. Witnessed. Filed. And now, enforced. The judge flipped to that section, cleared his throat, and asked her attorney if there were any objections. There weren't. Her lawyer just shook his head. Probably knew the photo I'd taken was more than enough. That was the moment it hit her. I saw it, the shift in her face. The way her jaw tensed, and her eyes blinked twice fast like she was trying to process what had just been confirmed out loud. It was one thing to suspect how this might go. It was another to hear it read back by a judge. She wasn't getting anything. No second chance. No piece of the life she'd thrown away. When court adjourned, the gavel came down like a closing door. We stood. Her eyes followed me as I picked up my folder from the table. And then, she stepped toward me. "Mark," she said, voice barely above a whisper. I stopped, turned to face her. She swallowed hard, hands wringing. I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't know how far it would go. I didn't mean to lose you." She paused, searching my face. Her voice cracked a little. "Can we talk? Just once. I don't know. Maybe start over." The room had emptied. Just the two of us, a bailiff by the door, and the echo of her words bouncing off the walls. I stepped in close enough that only she could hear me. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "You threw away forever for 5 minutes. You don't come back from that." Her lips parted, like she wanted to say something back. But she didn't. I watched her face fall, slowly, like someone realizing the last light just went out in a room they used to love. And then I turned. I walked out that door with my head high, the papers in my hand, and a weight lifted from my shoulders that I'd carried for far too long. I didn't look back. Not once. I ended up settling just outside of town, in a little 2-bedroom place with a wraparound porch and tall pines out back. The kind of house where you can hear the wind before you feel it. Peaceful. Clean. No memories in the walls. Just fresh paint and new floors, mine and mine alone. It wasn't fancy. Just right. Mornings, I'd drink coffee on the porch with the dog I'd adopted from the shelter, a mutt named Duke with more loyalty in his tail than I'd seen in years. Evenings, I'd cook for one, keep the radio low, and enjoy the kind of quiet that doesn't come with tension buzzing under it. That silence was earned, and I held it like a gift. Work stayed steady. I kept my hands busy, took on projects I could take pride in, porch rebuilds, small barns, remodeling jobs for neighbors who remembered what I'd been through but never brought it up. Folks around here know how to give space when someone's putting their life back together. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I met her. Not all at once. It wasn't fireworks or some movie scene. It was simple. Honest. We met through a client. She ran the local nursery, knew her way around wildflowers and muddy boots. The first time we talked, I noticed she listened. Really listened. The second time, she brought me coffee, black, remembered how I liked it. She didn't pry. Didn't ask about the past. Just made room for whatever came next. We took her time. No pressure. No big promises. But I felt something I hadn't felt in years, safe. Like I didn't have to look over my shoulder or guess what someone meant when they smiled. A few months in, I asked if she wanted to go away for a weekend. I already knew where. That cabin in the mountains, the one I'd booked before everything went to hell. This time, it wasn't a desperate attempt to fix something. It was something to look forward to. And when we got there, the air smelled like pine and wood smoke, and the stars actually showed up. We sat by the fire, talked about music and dogs and what kind of soup belongs in winter. It was quiet. And real. Back in town, I heard my ex had moved in with her parents again. Word was she couldn't find steady work, too much baggage after how things ended at her firm. She tried to start over, but the cracks followed her. That's what happens when you bet everything on the idea that consequences don't apply. I don't hate her. Not anymore. But I don't pity her either. She made a choice. One moment. One weakness. And that moment took down everything she'd built. Me? I rebuilt. And this time, I did it right. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have written on the note he left? If you liked the story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.